All right, I want to take you all back to 2012. Heck yeah, we love that year. Y2K12. All right, let's hear it for 2012. 2012, let's see, you guys were like 5? That's a good age. You were 4? You were this many? Oh, it was this many. That's great. 5? Feels like you're reaching for me across a great divide. In 2012, I was, what was I? I was 18. Yeah. I know, I was a legal adult. I could be incarcerated and everything. In 2012, I had just graduated high school. I was a worship leader at a church. I was actually a worship leader at this church in 2012. I was leading worship, and let me tell you, many of you saw me lead worship. We were together at that time, but let me tell you, my faith was in shambles. My relationships were falling apart. Nothing was going well, and my life in that moment was largely, it just felt empty. So I want to rewind and kind of take you back to why that happened to me. And so I was born and raised in the church, this church, actually, and no one is perfect, but all the way through high school, I was a pretty good kid. I was a pretty good little cartoony church kid. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't fool around with girls. If I happened to swear or cuss, that was a red letter day for me. If I said, damn, it was if I said that, it was I went home and I'm something didn't feel right today. I need to confess something. I remember once, I think I was 17, but I was riding on my uncle's ATV. I was driving it, and I looked down at the warning label, and it was no persons under the age of 18 should drive this. And I remember stopping and being I'm living in sin. I'm not kidding. I was a goody two-shoes. I was kind of lame. But for the rest of the day, I was you know what? I profess to follow Jesus, and I worship him, and I read my Bible, and then I go and I do stuff like this. I do all the things I don't want to do, right? My flesh is warring against me. I'm riding ATVs underage. I feel like I had a confession. This memory just came back to me, and I called my uncle, who hates Christians, and he was yeah, you were a loser. I'm cool, that's fine. Yeah, I was a super good kid. I don't have the high school testimony where it's I was living like hell, then God pulled me out of it, Paul in the Damascus Road moment, and then I became an apostle. No, I was a good, churchy, evangelical church kid. My favorite superhero was Bible Man. If you get that, it's real. He is a direct ripoff of Batman. Don't do it now. Sometime later, just Google Bible Man. There are videos. There's this whole suit-up process where it's sword of the spirit is this cool thing, and it's literally a bright blue Batman suit with a cross. It's hilarious. But no, it was good. I loved it. I genuinely loved Jesus. I loved church. I was a Bible study leader. I led worship. And the interesting thing is that late high school and into early college, I never really had a lot of Christian friends. I was a super churchy kid, but my entire friend group was super unchurchy. I didn't really have a Christian friend group. I kind of hung out with the partiers and those kinds of people. I never really did anything bad in high school. I don't recommend this, by the way. But I kind of hung around them a ton, and they were super cool with me. They never pressured me to do anything. They were never oh, Jake, you're so lame. Why don't you smoke weed with us? I don't know why that's what they sounded like. They sound like normal people. But no, they were pretty cool to me. But all high school long, I kind of had this nagging feeling growing where I'm looking at them, and I don't know. I'm looking at their lives, and I'm they drink, they smoke, these guys, the guys I knew, I'm yeah, they're fooling around with their girlfriends. And I'm I know that's bad. I know I shouldn't do that. And I know I shouldn't want to do that, but that looks like a lot of fun, and I don't get why I have to miss out. I don't get why they get to do whatever they want, and I'm over here and if I even stub my toe and say a bad word, I feel guilty. I'm conviction is inconvenient, isn't it? Like having strong convictions, strong beliefs, it's inconvenient and not always fun. It's hard, it's painful. And so I'm like, man, like when I sin, I feel like pain and guilt for it. But these guys, like they can go and hook up with their girlfriend and they feel fine the next day. I'm like, I know I shouldn't want that, but it kind of sounds like fun. But I kind of like repressed that thought in high school. I'm like, no, right? Like, Bible man, help me. And I got to college, and that intensified like crazy. My roommates in college were crazy. Like the second night in college, my roommate who I shared a room with hooked up with a girl while I was in the room. Like I woke up to it and she was like, is your roommate cool? And I'm like, I am not cool. I like stormed out. It's true in more ways than one. But hanging around those guys, I was just super, I didn't think that was going to be so funny, man. Yeah, it's true. Jake is super lame. I'm going to make a note if I ever do this sermon again. Don't use joke. Too distracting. No, so I hung out with these people all the time. That nagging feeling kind of grew where I was like, man, like I don't know. This conviction thing is inconvenient. They seem to be having a lot of fun. I got really, honestly, tired and sick of being the goody two-shoes. I got sick and tired of it. And so I stopped. I started to kind of do the things all my friends were doing. And I was like, but here's the thing. I was still a Christian. I still love Jesus. And I'm like, I'm not willing to give up on the whole church thing. I'm not willing to give up on the Christian community thing. I still want to follow Jesus. And so I went to church on Sundays, hung out with kind of some Christian friends here and there, but at the meantime was doing all the other things that my convictions previously wouldn't have allowed. I was trying to live both lives. I was trying to enjoy all this stuff over here while still staying faithful to all this stuff over here. And I continued to do this until I found myself leading worship in the morning when I hooked up with my girlfriend the night before. And let me tell you, that sets your soul on fire. It's a rough feeling. I'm being very honest. If you haven't been able to tell yet, my stories, I'm not usually the hero. It's just honest. But so back to 2012, I am working here at the church. My life's kind of a mess, and I'm just like, my faith is in shambles. I feel guilty all the time. My relationship with my girlfriend is awful. Like it's just kind of dumb. Like there's nothing in my life that has meaning and value. And as I think back on those moments, what I realize now, what I reflect on now, is I didn't do those things because I just got super tempted. I didn't do those things just because, like, I was tempted in those specific ways. I did those things because I believed a lie. I bought a lie. I bought into a bill of goods, a lie that has become so normalized in our culture and in our world, most people really wouldn't even consider it to be a lie. I might not have dared to say this out loud. If I said it out loud, I probably would have had to admit how wrong it was. But I was living a life ruled by one statement: you can have it all. I can have it all. I could be a Christian, do the church thing, use God to get rid of my guilt, and then go and enjoy everything else, right? I could do the church thing. I could come to church, make it feel like I was right with God, expunge myself from guilt, and then I could go right back and enjoy everything else I was doing. Everything that I knew was contrary to my convictions, everything I knew that was contrary to what Jesus taught, the way Jesus wanted me to live, I would go and do the other things, not because I was super tempted, because I honestly believed I could do both and not sacrifice. I could equally enjoy all options in my life without sacrificing a single thing. I could have a foot squarely in both worlds and sacrifice neither. I could have a foot squarely in both worlds and equally enjoy both. Like a consumer, I could take what I wanted from church, I could take what I wanted from the world, I could bring it all together and say, this works for me, and that's what matters. I could have it all. But what I found personally, what I'm going to argue theologically tonight, is that this simple little phrase, you can have it all, is nothing short of a lie from the devil. It's engineered to drain your life of meaning, siphon off your joy, and leave you feeling empty everywhere. We've been in a series called Liar. We've been talking about how we have an enemy in the Christian life. We have someone to follow, Jesus. We also have a nemesis. We have an enemy. We have someone against us who hates us. And he's smart. He builds tactics to sabotage us and trip us up. And the devil's smart, so what he does is he tells lies that appeal to our desires and then become normalized in culture. The devil tells lies that appeal to our desires and then become normalized, so we don't even see that we're there. This is what the devil does again and again and again. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, the devil is a murderer, he's a liar, he's the father of lies. When he speaks in lies, he speaks his native language. The devil is a liar, he tells lies. And one of the most common lies he tells Christians and people in general is you can have it all. You can live a little bit in this world and a little bit in that world. Take what you want from both, and it'll work out for you. As long as it works for you, it works. As long as you think it works, then it works. And we treat our schedules this way too. Especially in Pleasanton, we live with schedules that are insanely full. Like I graduated from high school only 10 years ago, but let me tell you, my schedule was nowhere near as busy as any one of yours is. Like, it's nutty. People who say, like, high schoolers are just soft today. It's not harder. No, it's harder. Like, you have it harder than earlier generations did in high school. You are busier. You are more stressed out. You have way more going on. Where do you think that comes from? You can have it all. You can be as popular as you want to be. You can be a star athlete, the best student in the world. You can be the best daughter. You can be the best sibling, the best son. You can also come to church. You can do all these things equally well. You can have it all. You don't have to sacrifice. You can live a life where you can enjoy everything offered to you and you can sacrifice nothing. You can have everything. We believe it in our schedules. We believe it in our morality. But it's a lie. It's a simple little lie. And the devil's told it again and again and again. Look at Eve in the garden. We've been talking about the Garden of Eden. By the way, the Garden in Eden is the right way to say it, but I say Garden of Eden because it's in there. Anyway, biblical corrective moment. So Garden of Eden, the serpent slithers over to Eve. Eve's about to take the fruit, right? The one thing God has said no to in creation. The devil tells a lie. He says, no. If you take that fruit, you won't die. You'll become just like God. Let me ask you in a minute. Do you think Eve thought by taking that fruit she would lose the garden? Do you ever think about that? Do you think she thought that? Do you think she thought like, okay, if I take this fruit, I'm going to lose this whole paradise with God? Do you think she thought that way? No, she would have counted the cost and said, that's not worth it. You know what she thought? I can have it all. I can have the garden, I can have the fruit, I can have God's will, I can have my selfishness, I can have my desires, I can have paradise, I can have life and flourishing, and I can be Lord. I can have it all. Same thing with Abraham. God promises Abraham a huge family, lots of children. Instead of waiting on God's promise, what does Abraham go and do? He has his wife sexually assault their slave girl. What is he saying? I can have it all. I can have God's promise. I can also have it in my timing. I can have God's promise and I can have my schedule. Think about David, my middle son's middle namesake. David, great guy, man after God's own heart and God's own words, except for one little moment where he sees a girl bathing on a rooftop naked and he says, I want her. Just like Eve in the garden, he sees, he wants, he takes. Living in both worlds, says, I can be king. I can hold on to my power. I can hold on to my authority. I can hold on to the promises of God. I can also have her body. I can have it all with no consequence. I can equally enjoy everything. Even fast forward to the New Testament, there's this famous story where this young man approaches Jesus. He says, Jesus, I will do anything to follow you. I want to live in your world. And Jesus says, okay, that sounds great. It seems to me like you have a problem with your money and like you love it quite a bit. Sell what you have and then come and follow me. And the rich man goes away sad. And we never hear the rest of his story, but we can kind of guess it, can't we? He wants to live in both worlds. He wants to have his money and his power and his riches, and he wants to have the lowly way of Jesus at the same time. Here's the reason that you can have it all is a bill of goods, because everything truly meaningful in life requires some level of sacrifice. Everything truly meaningful in life requires some level of sacrifice. If you want to know what it is that you actually find most valuable in your life, the question is not what do you want the most. The question is what do you view as worth sacrificing for? What is the thing you would willingly sacrifice for? You would sacrifice your comfort for. You would sacrifice your time, your energy. You would sacrifice your schedule. What's the last thing that would be on your schedule if you deleted everything else? Besides like sleep and eating. What's the last thing? What is that totally defendable thing for which you are willing to sacrifice everything else, that item of greatest value? It's not what you want the most, it's what you're most willing to sacrifice for. Everything in life that is meaningful requires sacrifice. Everything requires sacrifice. The thought of a perfectly balanced life where you can have it all is a lie, because what is meaningful requires sacrifice. It always requires sacrifice. And so when we live a life where we try to have it all, when we mistake busyness for conviction, when we let go of conviction and we live a busy life in 2 feet in 2 different worlds, the reason it doesn't work isn't because you're busy. It's because you have removed meaning from your life. When you live a life without sacrifice, you live a life without meaning. Here's a quote from a guy named Mark Manson. He is not a Christian. He wrote a book titled How to Give an F. He doesn't say F. He says flip. I'm kidding. No, he doesn't. He says this: when we attempt to do everything, to have it all, we're essentially attempting to live a valueless life. A life where everything is equally gained and nothing lost. And here it is. When everything is necessary and desired equally, then nothing is necessary or desired at all. Friends, here's that same quote in my words. If you have nothing to sacrifice for, you got nothing to live for. If you have nothing to sacrifice for in your life, then you have nothing worth living for. Think about it. Think if there's nothing in your life that is worth your ultimate sacrifice, then there is nothing in your life that has ultimate meaning. If you were to ask me, like, Jake, what do you care about the most in your life? And I would say, oh man, my family, my wife, and my kids. And you're like, oh, well, this would be a weird conversation, but you're like, are you willing to sacrifice for them? And I'm like, no. I want to live my life, live my schedule. I want to pick my own schedule every day, kind of do my own thing, sacrifice nothing. Sacrifice none of my sleep for my newborn. Sacrifice none of my schedule for my wife. Sacrifice none of my energy for my 2 kids who just want to play. Do I value my family? No, right? I might think I do, but let me ask you, what is desiring something without sacrifice? What is the desire for something without the intent for sacrifice called? That's called fantasy. Desire without the intent to sacrifice for it, that's just fantasy. Everyone wants an awesome, muscular, fit body. That took a turn. Everyone wants a great body, right? Not everybody is willing to go to the gym, grind it out, diet, learn about their own body, those kinds of things. Everyone wants to be in a great relationship with great sex and great loyalty and everything else. Not everyone is willing to do the hard work of dying to yourself every day that is required in a good relationship. Everyone wants to go to the best school, right? Achieve all your wildest dreams. Not everyone is worth sacrificing all that it takes to get there. We can all fantasize about ourselves. Let me ask you, let's have an honest moment. When you listen to a really cool song or a really good song, how often do you imagine yourself being the one performing it before people admiring you? I do it all the time. There's music in my story, okay? It's a thing. It's not, I thought we were going to have a moment. No, it's just me. Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Maybe not that. If you have desires to see yourself as a rock star, but you're unwilling to put in the grind and devote your life around it and sacrifice for it, it's just fantasy. It's what the enemy's trying to do to you. He's preaching you a message of you can have it all. You can enjoy everything equally. You should sacrifice nothing in your life. What that results in is a life based on fantasies, not reality. You might try to live out your wildest fantasies, but they won't be real. They'll still just be fantasies. It doesn't work because if you have nothing to sacrifice for, you have nothing to live for. This is the devil's strategy. By tempting you with your desires to live a life where you sacrifice nothing, the devil wants to leave you meaningless. Let me ask you, do you want to live a meaningless life? No, it's a kind of a distinctive thing about your generation, actually. If you do any research on your generation, or even mine, what you'll find is this. When you ask your generation or mine what you want most out of life, the answer is not happiness. The answer is meaning. The answer is you want to go to bed at night feeling as though your life means something, don't you? You want to go to bed at night not just happy, but knowing that your life has some weight to it, that it has value, that it has significance. Think forward, hopefully, many years when you finally are on your deathbed and you think back on your life. Do you wish you had lived a generally happy life or a deeply meaningful life? It's meaning all the way, isn't it? Happiness matters, but we want meaning more. And the devil seeks to rob you of it. The devil seeks to take the thing you want meaning and drain it from your life, leaving you a meaningless little creature prone to anxiety, depression, and self-hatred. That's what the devil wants. He doesn't just want you to not follow Jesus. He wants you to suffer and get trapped in suffering, get trapped in shame, never come into the light, never find Jesus. That's what the enemy wants. And his little lie of you can have it all is his favorite way to do it. Don't just attack you. Get you to try to live a life with no sacrifice, so therefore you have no meaning. But the good news is this. The good news is that Jesus leads us out of meaninglessness and into meaning. Because here's the deal. To follow Jesus always requires sacrifice, which means that to follow Jesus always requires meaning. It's impossible to really follow Jesus and to do so in a meaningless way. It's impossible to have a real relationship with Jesus and for it to be meaningless because your entire relationship with Jesus is built on his sacrifice. Your entire relationship with Jesus is built on his ultimate sacrifice for you. Meaning is baked into your relationship with him. It is impossible to follow someone who died for you and to not have meaning given to you in relationship. Life with Jesus is not just good or moral, it is deeply meaningful and it's satisfying. Friends, the good news is not that we can live a life where we can have it all. The good news is that Jesus finds you as the thing so meaningful that it is worthy of total sacrifice. Get that through your head. The good news is not that you can have it all. You can have a life where you can take all that you can possibly get your hands on. You can have a job without pain, without suffering, without sacrifice. The good news is, what is it that Jesus found so meaningful that it was worthy of sacrifice? It was you. You are the object of meaning in the eyes of Jesus Christ. And it's his sacrifice that gives our relationship with him meaning. So let me ask you, which is more compelling? To live a life where you try to equally enjoy everything, sacrifice for nothing, and end up meaningless. End up an insignificant dot in history, irrelevant. Or to follow someone who is meaning itself. To follow someone who laid down his life for you, and now in relationship with him, you find complete meaning. And the way we find meaning with Jesus, you don't create your own meaning, you receive it from Jesus. He gives it freely. The way we follow him into that meaning is by sacrifice. You'll notice this. If you read the first pages of the Gospels and you watch Jesus call the first disciples, you watch him call Matthew, you watch him call John and Peter, you know what you will find at the beginning of each one of their stories with Jesus? Sacrifice. Jesus goes to the fishermen like Peter and says, hey, leave your nets, come and follow me. With Matthew or Levi, he goes to his tax collector booth and he says, come follow me, and Levi leaves the tax collector booth. We see prostitutes leave prostitution for Jesus. We see Zacchaeus climb a tree, see Jesus, and gives away everything he had stolen for Jesus. We see people give and give and give. Following Jesus requires a new situation created by your own sacrifice. To follow Jesus requires sacrifice because it is so meaningful. So let me ask you this. In the terms of Jesus talking to the fishermen, what nets does Jesus call you to leave? What nets does Jesus call you to leave? And understand this. This is not leaving happiness and going into sadness. This is leaving meaninglessness and going into meaning. What nets does Jesus call you to leave? Where have you bought the lie that you can just have it all and you can find meaning without sacrifice? Where is Jesus pointing you to good sacrifice? To saying, if you want to follow me, you gotta create a new situation. You gotta receive the meaning of the one who sacrificed everything for you. Friends, following Jesus is always a choice. That sacrifice is always a choice. Jesus leads you to it. Jesus invites you into the situation of sacrifice, but it is your choice. Will you try to have it all? Or will you freely sacrifice what you must? Will you freely sacrifice your demand to be Lord of your life? Will you sacrifice your own opinions based on God's truth? Will you stop trying to get God to work in your worldview, and will you start submitting your worldview to God? Will you sacrifice your demand and your right to determine your own sexuality on your terms? Will you sacrifice your demand to say, this is what is good? So you know what sin really is? It's taking what is evil and redefining it in our own terms. That's what sin always is. It's saying, what is evil? I'm going to say it's good so I can do it. It's giving up your right to do that. It's saying, I lay down every right of mine to be Lord of my own body, to be Lord of my own life. What nets does Jesus call you to leave? And friends, that sacrifice, my goodness, it's full of meaning. Because to follow Jesus is to choose three things. It's to choose conviction over consumerism. The way of Jesus is just better. You think consumerism is fun? Try conviction. Let me ask you, don't you want to live a life in which you care so deeply that you are willing to sacrifice everything? Don't you want to care that much? Imagine living a life where your heartbeat, where the things in the center of your life are so valuable to you, you would give everything away freely. Imagine a life like that. You can have it in Jesus. A life of profound conviction. To follow Jesus is to choose good over easy. Like Albus Dumbledore said, the day is coming when men must choose what is right over what is easy. Choose what is good over what is easy. The way of Jesus does not remove pain. In fact, I'll say this. The way of Jesus is often more difficult. Sacrificing is hard, it's painful, it's suffering. The way of Jesus is not easier, it's usually harder. The way of Jesus does not remove pain. What it does is it gives pain meaning. It doesn't remove pain, it makes your pain meaningful. When you suffer because you've picked up your cross and you're following Jesus, not because you're being deprived of what you want. And finally, to follow Jesus is to choose the real over the fantasy. To say, I don't want to live a life where I want things without any will to sacrifice. I don't want to live a life where I'm just ruled by my own appetites with no real conviction to give anything. I want to live a life where I am deeply willing to give what it takes to find true meaning. It's the way of Jesus. It's the way of Jesus through and through.